Tonight, the search for answers after a gunman rammed a truck into a church in Michigan and began shooting, killing 4 people and setting the building on fire. Investigators have identified the shooter as Thomas Jacob Sanford, an Iraq War veteran who served in the Marines. Now, Sanford's family is cooperating with the FBI as it investigates the attack as an act of targeted violence. And while the motive has not yet been established, the more that we are learning about the attacker, the less the right is putting on the left for the trial for violence. Notably absent from all of this is Kash Patel and J.D. Vance's assessment of the shooting, that the shooter's apparent politics are not, they're not coming up in this conflict. And it's so interesting because this attack is like so many others. I mean, there was another attack in North Carolina, just 3 people killed in a restaurant. And there are some common denominators, but I do think that all of a sudden the FBI is absent. The vice president is very calmly just saying this was horrible, but not attaching it to politics. And I think that's actually not bad.
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing. It's a good thing. It should have been that way from the beginning. But it just, it illustrates what's been happening over the last few weeks.
I think it's also a good thing that Kash Patel isn't doing press conferences about this, because he kind of bungled, the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination with saying all sorts of things that didn't end up being accurate. But putting him aside, we have a very serious problem in this country with mental health. Undiagnosed, untreated, this guy who, carried out these horrendous, horrible acts. Multiple deployments in Iraq. We know that, there are a ton of war veterans who are suffering with PTSD and all sorts of other mental health issues. There was someone who had conversations with him recently, and he was having all these paranoid thoughts. We have a serious problem. We're not taking care of our people in this country, and that's going to lead to these acts of violence. I'm not justifying it. I want to be clear about that. But in order to prevent it from happening, we need to stop pretending like we care about undiagnosed, untreated mental health issues and actually have our lawmakers, walk the walk, allocate the money, have these mental health facilities that will actually help people. And it's not just this story. I mean, the story about the refugee from Ukraine who was stabbed to death on a train. I mean, the perpetrator in that case also had severe mental health issues. I believe schizophrenia, according to his mother. We need to do something about this instead of just reacting to it every time it happens.
Casting blame, which has been happening. I mean, there is an escalation. I think there's no question. Violence is absolutely escalating.
There's no
but
doubt about it.
The blame game, I think, is part of what's happening here, too.
I was blessed, really, to have a wonderful conversation with the Grand Russell Nelson, who's 101 years old. He just passed. He's been leader of the Church of Latter-day Saints. He's a very decent brother. And one of the things we talked about was the spiritual blackout, the moral meltdown, and now, of course, government shutdown, all happening at the same time without social supports in place for the weak and the vulnerable. And that's where Baptists like me and Mormons like him, Jews, Muslims, secular folk, Buddhists, Hindus have a moral and spiritual common ground. And we need to accent that common ground in order to try to get through this shutdown and the meltdown and the blackout that's happening in the country.
Abby, first of all, thank you for talking about this issue. We have seen a significant, sharp increase in attacks on Christians and churches. Bishop Robert Barron put the number, I believe, at over 700%. The Family Research Council said last year there were 383 attacks on churches. And so I think that it's important to recognize that people of faith, as they have for thousands of years, are being persecuted, and Christians in particular. In this particular case, Dr. West, I agree with you. We live in a society and a world with sin and wickedness. We just have to recognize that there are a number of factors that could go into why these individuals are launching these attacks, and there's not probably one single thing that we can point to, Abby, unfortunately.
But why? I hear you mention the churches, and I think that's an important factor. But I mean, I saw people correctly noting that schools, just everyday schools where your kids go for elementary school all the way up to high school, are also ground zero for mass attacks, mass violence in this country. Why isn't that talked about? And why isn't anything being done about that? I mean, that is perhaps more persistent than even this sort of left, right, churches, non-churches, schools. And the common denominator is crazy people with guns.
I would say the common denominator is all of us. We have sucked the joy out of life. And we can't see the difference between disagreement and hatred. And when we have a disagreement with our neighbor or somebody who takes our parking spot at the Walmart, what do? We turn to violence. We can't have a conversation. We can't be civil about it. So every time in the aftermath of the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk or this situation, I know people want to ascribe political motivations, but this isn't always about politics.
No, it's not.
Yes, there was an attack on the freedom of speech. There was an attack on the freedom of religion. Yes. But we are attacking each other and our humanity and our decency every single day. And so when we allow politicians to make this about politics, guess what? They're making it about themselves.
Well,
because they're worried about being the next victim. And I don't want anything to happen. But it could happen to any of us at any time. And we don't focus on that enough.
I agree with you wholeheartedly in what you just said. I also think it's a way of deflecting any blame, right? Because this country is not doing well. The ordinary people in this country are not doing well, whether it's due to having difficulty making ends meet, difficulty paying medical bills, difficulty getting treatment for mental health issues, PTSD from multiple deployments to the Middle East. Like, these are real problems that have never really been addressed. And whose fault is that? It's our lawmakers who just refuse to address them and instead get into these like ridiculous squabbles, political theater, endless hearings, whether it's in the House or the Senate, that doesn't ever lead to anything. We need to start holding our politicians accountable. And this is not me blaming the left or the right. Both parties are responsible for essentially neglecting their duties. That's how I feel about it.
I think it's beyond politics and even elected officials. You're talking about a culture. I think you're talking about ways of life that no longer put a premium on integrity, honesty, and decency and preoccupate with the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. So survival of the slickest. No society can survive with that kind of spiritual vacuity, no matter what. And that's where that spiritual level that you're talking about, brother. And I agree with you on this. I can tell you that. We might disagree on a whole lot of other things, but he's hitting the issue here. Because as human beings, if we don't get beyond these political squabbles and partisanship, we're going to lose the planet. We're going to lose the democratic experiment. The empires take over. And next thing you know, we got the reciprocals running around.
The last couple of weeks have been characterized by partisan finger pointing. Is it time now to move forward in a way that actually gets to some of the underlying issues that Anna was talking about?
I think you could, but I will agree with my friend Dr. West here. I don't know that the answers all lie in politics or legislation or executive orders. I think that fundamentally what we've seen is as people have abandoned religion and faith and the belief in Jesus Christ, we have moved away from some of those very foundational principles that not only were instrumental in the creation of this great country that we live in, but have guided us for thousands of years. And so I wouldn't necessarily always look to Congress or the White House for answers, Abby. I think there are steps that they can take. I used to serve as the senior warden at my church, and we took steps years ago to harden the facility and make steps. And I know that you asked the question about schools. Schools have done the same thing, and still people find ways.
And I think you're